Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of my new Man2Man interview series. In this series, I'm going to be talking to interesting men about life, culture, self-development, spirituality, and of course, masculinity. For our first guest, I'm honored to have the legendary Elliott Hulse. For me, and I'm sure for many of you, Elliott was like a surrogate older brother for me when I was growing up. He taught me about mindset, lifting, and strength. Throughout his career, Elliott has gone through many different phases. Some of them I absolutely loved, some of them I didn't really connect with, and some of them just kind of left me scratching my head. But that's the thing with Elliott, he's a real guy on a real journey, and he's always been generous enough to let us in on it. Recently, where that has led him is back to the family, back to traditional masculinity and traditional Christianity. And I've had a great conversation with him about all of these things. In our chat today, we talk about the main things ailing the modern man, the issues with feminism, what men are supposed to do in order to get their life back on track. I found it very fascinating, and I hope you will as well. If you like what Elliott says, then make sure you go and you check out and subscribe to his YouTube channel. You'll find a link for that in the description below. Likewise, if you liked what I had to say, make sure you check out my free class on manhood mastery, the 3 keys to neuromasculine training. In this free training, I will show you how to work with your male brain, with your male biology, to cut out escapism like porn, video games, etc., and become the man that you are meant to be. It took me almost a decade as a professional men's coach to discover this stuff, so I hope you check it out. Without further ado, here is the interview. I hope you enjoy. So, we are joined by the illustrious, the infamous, the often polarizing, but always interesting Elliott Hulse. Thanks so much for being here, brother.
My pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you've gone through many different iterations in your public career. And I'm excited to kind of walk through some of that. Really interested to talk about where you're at today, what you're up to. But first off, how you doing, man?
All is well, man. Been pretty busy. So, waking up early, going to bed late, hustling, grinding, in one of those phases now.
I can relate big time. Since I have my daughter was born, I just feel like I've been on a time machine. And then you throw COVID on top of that. I don't even know how to process time anymore, man. It feels weird.
Yeah, you're right. It's all one day just blended into each other.
Exactly. So, I've been following you since, let me think, probably around, I was 14 or 15 or something like that. And
Damn.
yeah, it was.
How old are you now?
32, I guess. Maybe, could that be that long? When did you start putting videos?
Don't make me feel old, man. You're a teenager.
Yeah, I was watching you in high school, man. And
Doesn't make any sense.
it was you were kind of like the big brother I didn't have. So I was the oldest of 5 kids, older sister, no older brother, and I kind of looked up to you because I had the neighborhood kids and things like that, but they didn't get into stuff you got me into strength training and things like that, but I was more interested in your mindset stuff, right? I didn't actually start lifting until college probably, but I was really just interested in your ideas on mindset, how to hold yourself, all that kind of stuff. And obviously there was a lot of other people like me, there was thousands of people watching your videos and all that kind of stuff. What was that like becoming kind of the surrogate big brother / probably even father figure to hundreds of thousands of dudes?
It was right where I was supposed to be, because that's what I am. I am the big brother. I'm the oldest of 4, right? And I was always the leader. I was always the captain. I was always on top. And it was just where I've always been. And it's not even like I even tried to. It's just that's my nature. Wherever I went, I was always the first. I was always the oldest. I was always on top. I was always the winner. And so when I showed up online, it was just a natural progression. It's not even like I tried. It's just who I am, bro.
I could see that. And I could see that through all your different kind of, stages and ideas too, is you're just confident about whatever you're doing in the moment. You just full bore, go for it, own it. And that's who you are and how you show up. Right.
Yeah. I don't think about it. I just jump. That's my nature, bro.
Yeah. I imagine that's actually like, that's a double-edged sword, because what cuts people down so much is the self-analysis. They get paralyzed, paralysis by analysis. This is definitely something I've struggled with a lot in my life. And sometimes it's just, pardon the term, but it's like you sort of just go like full retard and just like stop thinking, just go. And like every once in a while, probably actually more often than not, you get a reaction. Something happens when you do that. You just start doing stuff almost on instinct. But it also, you can make some mistakes that way as well. So why don't you tell me, like what's it like looking back at your career and kind of looking at the different things you've gone through? Because I imagine there's guys watching this right now who've tuned in at different periods and tuned out, and it's like, what's your thoughts upon your trajectory?
Man, it all revolves around the center of strength, and it always has. Like I said, like when I was a kid, I was in kindergarten, right? That's right before first grade. That's what they call it. Kindergarten here in the U.S. And my uncle lived with me, and he was a bodybuilder. He was a martial artist. He ran marathons. He was just a badass. I have his genetics, but I also had him as a mentor. I was just a little kid. And so he was teaching me and my brothers how to do like push-ups and pull-ups and just like busted up in the basement, kicking bags and stuff when I was just a baby. And so when I got to school, I was the fastest. I was the strongest. When I got to high school, my uncle started teaching. He came back into my life. He left for a while, got into some bad relationships with women, then came back. I was like, all right. So he decided to become a personal trainer, and he started teaching me and my brothers once again how to lift barbells. And so then when I played high school football, all the kids from my team, my house was across the street from the school. All the kids from my team would come over to my house, and I was teaching them how to lift. So because I was the strongest one. And I just followed that path through college. I went to university, even in university, I was like the assistant strength coach. Basically, like the kids would come to me and ask me questions. One time the strength coach was real upset with me because I was giving advice contrary to him. I was kind of a little rebellious, but I knew what I was talking about because my uncle mentored me. And so I was strength coach, and then I became a personal trainer. And then I started strongman training. I got involved with that. And then I started a strength camp, which is my company out in the park. And then it's always been about strength. And then I got famous for saying, become the strongest version of yourself and grow stronger. And so that's what people knew about me. And then now, my mantra is I'm making men strong again. Yeah. And so it's always been around strength. It's always been revolved around strength. It's always been around men's strength. And that's another thing that I never chose. It wasn't like I went out one day and was like, oh, I'm gonna make men strong. It just happened to be that's who's around me. Just being a football player and whatnot. And when I opened my strength camp gym, that's who was there. When I was a personal trainer in like just a basic gym, it was called Lifestyle Family Fitness. All my client role it was just all men. Yeah. So it's like, a lot of times people say that they want to know what their path is in life. Like, what is my mission in life? What's my purpose in life? What's my path in life? In a lot of ways, my path was just revealed to me. I just look back and I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially when it doesn't always make sense in the moment. Like, for me, one of the big things, like where I started on YouTube was helping guys quit porn. And this is something that like I wrestled with for years and years and years. When I was younger, like I was, raised Catholic. And I remember the, one Lent in high school, I was like a sophomore or something. I was like trying real hard to quit. I wasn't going to masturbate, wasn't going to watch porn or something like that. And then I had this, I went like 30 days and I felt like I was all pent up. I was all emotional. I was upset. I was irritable. I felt like I was like going crazy. And then I relapsed. And I remember I felt so much better. I just started cracking up, like the endorphins. I was just like, oh my gosh, these priests, these people, they don't know what they're talking about. This shit is good for me. My body needs this. When I find out, X number of years later, I guess like when I was 22 then, I realized, I was just actually already addicted and I was going through like the worst part of withdrawal. And like, those kinds of weird things. It's strange how it does that, because it just, your past will line up and then it'll help you serve your future. And so like I see that with what you did is, you had that uncle, you had the football guys, you had all that stuff kind of training you all along the way. And I think that's what God kind of does to you. He lays it all out even if you can't see it.
Yeah, hindsight is 2020, they say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just hopefully we don't get distracted along the way. And I have a touch of ADD. And so I'll get distracted with shiny objects along the way. And they look like fun things to dive into.
Yeah.
But just the theme throughout has always come back to strength, no matter what it is. So I'm happy that has been there.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you didn't just stop with like, muscular strength and stuff like that, which is part of what attracted me to your content. You wanted to, like, I could tell you wanted to get to like the deep strength, the stuff beyond the superficial. And I remember, like, tell me if I'm correct here, but it seemed like your first kind of foray into that was this whole like bioenergetics stuff. How much of that do you still like, follow, practice, whatever? Because that was very interesting to me for a period, and I played around with it quite a bit. I don't see you talking about it so much anymore, though.
It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. My foray into that is really my wanting to know what I am. That was a big question. So I know that's sort of like an existential question that a lot of millennials wrestle with, but being a little bit older than you guys, and my dad being like a hardcore alpha male that grew up in the jungle, he never understood what was this obsession my son has with finding himself. And of course, I grew up in a Disneyfied culture, which is all about individualization and, you're special and you're a snowflake. But I was obsessed with this. And I think mainly because I'm mixed race. I grew up in Long Island, New York. And so everybody know what everybody is. There was Italians, there were Jews, there were Haitians, there were Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans. Everybody trying to talk Puerto Rican to me. I don't speak a lick of Spanish. And so forever people are asking me as a kid, Elliott, what are you? And so from a very early age, I had this question in my heart, like, what am I? Who? And so I have to find myself out. So I must have been about like 12 years old, I started digging into philosophy and religion. Just unbeknownst, it wasn't a moral thing. It was an ego thing. It was like, what the heck am I? And so when I started down that route, I discovered, all kinds of fascinating things, but namely the idea that I'm a spirit being and that we're inhabiting these bodies, and so that we are far more than what meets the eye, right? And that we've got a spirit. And then I discovered quantum physics. And so I became enraptured or enmeshed with this idea that there's a spectrum of being, right? And so my thoughts play into that, but then the thoughts are existential, but also material, because then there's neurotransmitters and synapses going off in my brain. And it's like, so what is it? Is it intangible or is it tangible? And so, but it's both. We're both. We're, in the Bible, it says that God breathed into the dust and made man. It's like there's spirit, breath, pneuma, right? Which is spirit. Right. And then there's dust. So we literally are this dust. I am this dust. I'm this dirt. I'm this material being. But we're also a pattern, right? We're a blueprint. We're something higher. I like to say that we're the pattern in the matter, right? Because what is God? God of the Bible is called the Father because for a number of reasons, because he reaches out like a father does. He comes down like a father does. But also the word father comes from the word pater, which means pattern. Right? A man's, your essence, your pattern. And so we live in this matter world, but we have this imprint of a pattern on us. And it's just the whole spectrum in between. So bioenergetics was fascinating because if I could just sum it up in one word or in one phrase that I sort of helped me understand it. And then I put it out into the market to see if people could grasp it, which is the body is the mind. The body is the mind. The body literally is the mind, even on a material level. Because look, if you're gonna be pure materialistic, right, and consider, okay, well, the mind is my brain. All right, fine, it's your brain. Well, where does your brain end, bro? If you take out the brain, it has a brain stem that goes all the way down right into my pelvic floor with branches that reach out all over throughout into my organs and viscera, into my muscular system, everywhere. And so this whole thing is my mind. And then you could start to wonder, like, well, what part of me is thinking? And what does it look like when my body thinks? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I came across the work of Wilhelm Reich throughout all this. Wilhelm Reich, I have a love-hate relationship with him, but let's talk about the love for a moment. He discovered that he was a student of Sigmund Freud, and Sigmund Freud had this whole concept that if you were going to heal somebody of their existential ills, you talk to them, and they will bring it all out based on your conversation with them. Well, he started to watch people when they spoke, and he noticed that their bodies did weird things, or their bodies would take certain forms, or certain parts of their body would change based on the emotional content of the conversation that they were having. And so he started to notice patterns in these postures that people took on based on the perceived threats in their lives, or the psychological predisposition of a person. And so he found something called character structure. Character structure is really fascinating because, it's true, because there are archetypes. Like, for example, if you watch movies, like the big fat funny guy in every movie, that's an archetype. That's a pattern. That's a character structure. You also could call that a masochist. And he discovered that the way the energy flows in that type of person is that it turns in on itself. My character structure is a bit more of a psychopath. My energy rises up and I spit it out. I have lively eyes and I have a lot of energy. A masochist turns it in on himself. That's why he's always self-deprecating. And so these various psychopathologies became crystallized. He understood that they were crystallized in the body. And if they're crystallized in the body, you can heal somebody's mind by working with the muscle.
Interesting. Huh. That's really cool. I love that stuff where it's like, you're delving for that synthesis of concepts. Was this the guy who also got into the muscle testing stuff, or was that a different person?
No, that's different.
Okay.
I never really got too much into that.
Yeah, that's wild too. I don't know if you've ever checked that out. It's like you can ask your subconscious questions and test the strength of a finger or an arm and stuff like that to see where it stands at. But anyway, what you're hitting on here is something that I feel like is massively important for the modern man in general, because I think feminine spirituality, it's done much better than male spirituality in this internet age. I'm not saying it's good stuff necessarily, but there is a feminine spirituality that's put out there, the whole goddess kind of idea, oh, you're a goddess, you're a queen, all that kind of stuff. It's much more part of mainstream culture. And I see you trying to bring that to men on some level. And this is part of what I'm interested in doing is neurospirituality. It's we live in a world that wants to deconstruct everything, right? It wants to say, oh, that wonderful feeling you have looking at that beautiful sunset, that's just, a bunch of neurochemical reactions. They want to break it all down and assume that removes all the meaning in things. But, you can take it the other way too. It's well, what does it mean that your neurochemicals explode when you look at your son or you look at your daughter, or, when you see that beautiful sunset? What does that say about you and your nature, right? And I think this marrying of the spiritual and the physical, it has to happen, because the modern mind, it accepts these scientific truths, but in doing that, it's made the false assumption that it needs to shed all of its spirituality. But the reality is, as far as I see it, is spirituality is the study of meaning, right? That's really what it is. It's saying this matters. It's taking a look at the material world and then making a belief statement about it. Because if you're just looking at raw data and facts, you're never going to get outside of being an agnostic, right? Because it's never going to, like, raw data, raw facts, it's not going to tell you how to live. Like what's the famous quote? You cannot get an ought from an is, right? At some point, you have to take a stance about the nature of things. And probably the deepest one's like, do you matter? Do you have any intrinsic worth, or are you just this, meaningless husk, right? And so I think the study of the body, the connecting it to the emotions, the connecting it to the the whole thing is what needs to occur. What do you think?
Yeah, it's all one thing.
Absolutely. So for you've like, when you've gone through these different phases in your life, you've kind of changed your perspective on different topics. One of them I'm interested to talk to you about, to understand where you're at now, is the idea of masculine versus like feminine energy. I've heard, a lot of guys, they think, in order to be a man is you need to get in touch with your feminine side. And this is something that always kind of like rankled me. I didn't really like this. It's like, I don't feel like I've got a feminine side. And, I just have different parts of a masculine side. And I wonder if that's like a semantic issue, or if there's some truth to it. What do you think about this? Like, do men need to get in touch with a feminine side?
We've done that too much. The soft man of the 19th. And so the problem is not that men need to get into touch with their feminine side. We've become big effeminate crybabies over the past 40 years. And so we've done that. And I see great value in it. I do see value in that. This understanding that there's an aspect of tenderness. But in that, we've beat out all aggression in men. And so anything that is indicative of any form of traditional masculinity is denigrated. And so I also am convinced that none of this is by accident. And I believe it's, I'm a conspiracy theorist, by the way. I believe it's
I am too, mostly.
A great ideological subversion meant to destroy a culture. Because if you weaken the men and you make women masculine, you destroy family. And it's worked, right? Families don't work. Nobody's getting married. And if they do, it's like 60% divorce rate, right? Why? Because the men are weak, they're effeminate, they're addicted, they're lazy, they're crybabies, they're in touch with their emotions, they put the pussy on the pedestal. And women, they're getting degrees, they're getting jobs, they're climbing the ladder, they're slapping men on TV, and it's okay. You see what I'm saying? So by doing so, and now we've got, we're at the peak of this now with transgenderism. So it's like, now we become so subjective, which is a fruit of feminism, just this deep subjectivity. Even the whole movement that you described in terms of women's spirituality. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but that's a perversion also. Men created religion. It's always been men. As far back as even Hinduism, the oldest religion on the earth. It's a masculine religion. But anyway, we live in diabolical times that have been disoriented and turned backwards. So you end up with women behaving a whole lot like men, thinking a whole lot like men, doing ugly things for women, and you got men doing the same exact thing. It's ugly. The other day I was reading a really good blog post. I don't remember the author of it, but he's talking about this very nature of masculine and feminine virtues. It's okay. In fact, it's important for a man to have some feminine virtue, but not at the expense of a foundation of masculine virtue. In other words, it's okay for a man if he's, say, what's a masculine virtue? He's assertive, right?
Yeah.
An assertive man, but he also is merciful. Say just in mercy, right? Just in mercy. He's just, right? I lay down a just punishment, but he's merciful, right? Like they say Jesus is. He's just and merciful. A good balance. But if a man is to turn away from just, right? Just action in a moment that requires what only a man can do, which is to fight and to stand up, right? Because our bodies we're built that way. We're weapons. Women aren't weapons. We're built that way. But if we relinquish our duty to be just in order to uphold this merciful ideal, we're a useless man. You're a useless man. Yes, it's good to be merciful, but you've turned away from your utility as a man by not executing justice. And it's the same way with a woman. For a woman to be so hard-lined that justice comes before mercy means she's a useless woman.
That's interesting.
So there's a balance, but it's not a 50-50 balance. It may be more like a 80-20 balance. A man must exhibit mostly masculine virtue if he's going to be useful as a man.
You know, it's really interesting you put it like that. Because I've come to something similar in my own take on things. Like, you know, there's been a lot of attempt to define masculinity. And it's like, oh, masculinity is this, this, and this. And it's kind of just like, why? Well, you know, it'll look at evolutionary arguments and things like that. But the one that's most interesting to me is the neurobiology sort of take on things, where it's like, all right, if you have a male brain, there are certain patterns of behavior that will function well in your male biology, right? Like for a man, he's going to feel his best when he's got roaring T levels. And guess what's like one of the biggest factors that determines that is how you live. It's not just, you know, what you eat and, you know, how you work out. Obviously that plays an effect on it, but it's like, are you taking risks? Are you being assertive? Are you entering into conflict? And so it's got me thinking that like really masculinity and femininity, it's like what you said. It's like there are different hormones that we're optimized for. Like men, like you said, we're warriors and we're workhorses. Like if you want to feel your best as a man, you got to be pushing yourself on some level. That's just what you have to do. And so there are certain, you know, behaviors that will align with that, right? And then women, they're much like, so for men, that's like the cortisol, dopamine sort of pathway. You know, you get hooked into something, you just go, you become that machine. But women, they're much more like the estrogen in them. It synergizes, to my understanding, more with oxytocin. And so it's like they are going to be feeling their best when they are being compassionate, connected, operating like that. And it's not that men don't have oxytocin. It's not that men can't do that. It's just that there is a certain kind of activity that men must orbit around. Of course, they can dip into that operation that women have. And women, they can dip into that striving, goal-setting, kick-ass kind of mode as well. But it's like, what are you most equipped for? Meaning like, you know, do what you are equipped for, and you're going to find, you know, your best performance, your most happiness, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Form equals function.
Yeah.
We're trying to function outside of our form, and it doesn't work. That's why we're suffering right now.
Yes, we are suffering a lot right now. What do you think are like the biggest things guys are struggling with today?
I think the biggest issue facing our culture is fatherlessness.
Fatherlessness. Can you say a little more about that?
Fatherlessness in regard to the father in the home, and also our sense of meaning that comes from story, mythology, religion, God the Father, the patterns that gave us purpose as men in our lives that our ancestors understood. This is the first time in history where we've got such a majority of, I don't even call people atheistic, because atheists think. These people don't even think.
They just have a new religion.
Right. It's the religion of self is really what it is. We're all self-worshipers, right? It's my feelings, my truth. You could only have transgenderism in a world that worships its own thoughts. Whatever I think I am, and it's subjectivity. And so the further you go into subjectivity, or the further you go into a gynocentric culture, the more feminine men become, the more subjective everything becomes. It's all about what I feel, right? And you give women grace for that because that's their nature, but that's the way men are behaving today.
Right. Did you see that documentary, What is a Woman?
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
That's how silly we are right now.
I know.
To even see that people take themselves that seriously and they call themselves university professors and whatnot, to me is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's like that documentary was simultaneously like hilarious and terrifying at the same time. Yeah. It's like when I saw that, I was like, I'm going to have to send my daughter to private school, because like man, I don't like, if this stuff really takes root, like, thank God I do see that there is backlash starting to form. It's a little bit tepid. You know, people are still afraid to speak out and things like that. But if this goes unopposed, I don't see how Western society continues. It's going to be something, it'll transform to some kind of weird communist, atheistic, like, crazy town, unless people are willing to stand up and, at the very least, speak the truth, right? Like, you don't need to necessarily be a paragon of virtue, or, you know, adopt the same morals or spiritual values as me. But, like, if people are willing to at least start speaking the truth, we can maybe stop this backslide. But where we're heading is frightening to me. What do you think? Where do you see us ending up if we do not have men starting to embrace traditional masculinity again?
Well, it's about the father again. We have to return to the father. We've slid this far because of our detachment from fathers, meaning, and then also, I'm talking like the literal flesh and bone father that busted his nut and gave you through your mama, and I'm talking about God the Father. And so it's interesting that if you study cross-cultural studies of initiation, masculine initiation, it all begins with the men, by the way. I'm talking about men because it starts with men. Masculine initiation, there's a pattern of movement away from the world of the mother into the world of the father. But it's a two-pronged approach to the father. It's called atonement. So the world of the mother is the world of matter, is the world of sensation, is the world of comfort, it's the world of mommy. It's the matrix, even the word matter, mommy, matriarch, matrix. It's the material Maya that we're hypnotized by.
Right. So like God the Father, Mother Earth kind of thing.
Right. Pattern in the matter. And so for a little boy, for girls and boys, it's very different because there's a movement away from the integrated ego with the mother that both boys and girls have, both baby boys and girls have. They think that they are their mother because they come out of the matter of our mother. I was in my mother. You're in your mother. We're made of the stuff of our mother, and and then we come out, and then there's an ego split at some point where the baby recognizes, oh, I'm not my mother. But for a little girl, that happens once. Oh, I'm not my mother's ego. She's there. I'm here. But for a boy, it happens twice, and then it continues. And not only does it happen twice, it needs to be consistently supported. That's why these people who say, oh, you don't need to be taught to be a man. Why does anybody have to teach you to be a man? You should just know how to be a man. They don't understand anything. They don't understand biology. They don't understand psychology. They don't understand anthropology, because we all come in many ways like our mother. But then there has to be a movement towards something that is above, which is father. And a boy has to do that. They call it the Oedipal phase. That's according to Freud.
So that two things is like, one, he realized, oh, I'm not my mother. And then the second one is, oh, I'm not even female. I'm something different. Right.
That's a crisis. I don't think people give enough credence to the fact that that's a crisis for a little bit. That's a split within the ego that happens around the age of 4. Now imagine you don't have a father. You don't have a father figure. You have no positive role model in your life when that split happens. What happens? It doesn't happen.
Right.
The little boy remains like a little girl in his thinking and his emotions and his behavior. He'll grow a penis. He'll grow hair. He'll get a deep voice. He'll gain muscle, but he'll also still continue to think and feel like his mom because he never got a chance to be mirrored by, and Robert Bly calls it, fed the father's food by his presence. There's a transference of an energy that by having a father in the home, the boy receives. Right. I remember just by watching my dad, I became like him. I didn't even have to teach me anything. He did.
Of course, you're obsessed with being like him, right? He was your hero. He was the Superman, right?
I was afraid of my dad.
Oh, okay.
My dad was pretty tough. It's his presence, though, and it's for every father, and that's why it's important. Number one, I say the father crisis isn't just fatherlessness. That's a part of it, but weak fathers. because they grew up the same way, you know, in the same effeminate, matriarchal, fatherless culture. And so our fathers and our fathers' fathers, we're about the third or fourth generation of fatherlessness in that regard.
Right. And I think, you know, what you're talking about rings very true. It's like the guys who never make that transfer into masculinity, like if they're in a society that tells them that's okay, they'll feel okay. They'll feel right for a little while. And a lot of that is allayed, in my opinion, by pornography, because pornography becomes kind of like this surrogate mother for guys. They can just, instead of going to mommy's tit for comfort, they just go to the virtual ones, right? And their dick becomes their new, you know, pacifier, their new binky or whatever. And so that's why I view quitting porn as the rite of passage for the modern man, because pretty much, you know, I was the first generation that like hit adolescence in the internet age. And like, there was no guidance out there for us. Like, you know, my parents didn't even know like what was even on the computer. Like, it was just like one of those things, we had unrestricted internet access to it. You get hooked on it. And I don't think it's possible to really find yourself as a man when you're still plugged in to that thing, right? Because, you know, until you have to actually take responsibility for your sexual energy, learn how to hold it as a man, there's a fundamental weakness that exists inside of you. And this is the thing. It's like, just like how you can, you know, you can train your body to hold greater weight, being able to hold your sex drive, that's a different kind of strength, to be able to feel it. Like most guys, they can't even feel it. They feel their sexuality for a second. They're like, oh God, I gotta go jerk off. Like, it hurts me. And it's just like, no, that's your potency. That's your fire. You got to learn how to hold that shit. Right. And I've seen you mention a little bit about, you know, quitting porn and that sort of thing. So you must be, you know, keyed in onto this somewhat, right?
I'm a mentor to your generation. You started watching me when you started watching porn.
Yeah.
So I know what you guys are all about.
Yeah.
Right. And so I get the questions. They're all coming in. And these are like, you know, these are grown men who are, like you said, are stuck with a binky, but it's their hand on their dick. And you nailed it when you said that, bro. It's definitely, that's they're tethered to their mommy nature through the sensation of blowing their load.
Exactly. And so what else can men do, you know, other than quitting porn and stuff like that? How can they reclaim their masculinity in a culture that I see there's like two extremes in it? Like, one, we've got obviously the hyper feminized culture. That's the bulk of it. But then there's a lot of stuff online that's like very cynical. It's masculine, but very cynical. It's like a lot of the red pill stuff. It's like, you know, very anti-feminine. It's all about, you know, yeah, this world's screwed up. You might as well learn how to manipulate women so you can sleep around.
Too. That's an effeminate stance on things. They're not any more masculine than the guy that's, you know, a simp. It's just that they're manifesting it differently, because that emotional attitude about life. Oh, it's all going downhill. Oh, it's no good. Oh, there's no more good women. All that whining and crying, even if it's anger, it's the anger is just covering the fear. And so that's an extreme form of the same thing.
Right. I could see that. It's so what we say the opposite would be taking, like, I mean, I believe, and I'm pretty sure you do too, it's, you know, marriage, family, become a patriarch, essentially. That's the path of masculinity. But what do you say to all the guys who do say, oh, it's too hard, there are no good women out there? How do you inspire them?
You're lazy. I just started a new program called GTG for Life, means Get the Girl for Life. And so I'm starting to mentor to a lot of these guys who join my program. And the number one problem that guys are having is that they just don't know how to go up to a girl and speak to them in a masculine way. Just have a conversation that's polarizing with a woman. And these are the same guys who are saying, oh, there's no good women. Anytime a guy says that, first thing I say, how many women did you approach this month, this year? Since you were a teenager? None. They don't. It's entertainment. And here's the thing too about the red pill part of the manosphere.
Yeah.
Men are, everybody's attracted to some sort of an emotional charge. Fear is very emotionally charging. Anger, is very emotionally charging. And when you watch, I catch myself. When you watch those videos, you get a lot of fear and you get a lot of anger. So it gets very addicting.
Mm.
And so a lot of the guys who are so-called, or a lot of the guys who have adopted this mindset, it's just like people who watch the news and they think that COVID's going to come and kill them and that they got to go take a bunch of shots and stuff.
Right.
It's the same fear. It's just manifesting itself in a different way. You're afraid of the boogeyman germ coming and killing you, and you're afraid of women. So much so that the mask that they wear is, I don't talk to any woman. They're just afraid. They just stay away. Oh, because I don't want to get divorce rate. Bro, you haven't even talked to a girl in 2 years. What are you talking about divorce rate? I have no idea.
Right.
They're afraid. And so they're reverting to their mommy nature the same way, but it's just manifesting itself a little differently.
Yeah. And then you have like the guys who are just really into the pickup and things like that. They just wanna, bang infinite numbers of chicks and go that route. And I always had a big issue with that because I'm like, how is that masculine? Like if you are not building anything, like if you leave no genetic legacy, like, I used to follow these like red pill, like, guys or whatever talking about how like, any guy who's a real successful player eventually, even if he's married, he's always allowed to have a girl on the side and, all that kind of shit. And it's just like, dude, do you think about children? Like that's the thing that's missing in a lot of the red pill like conversation. It's like guys get into it because they want to get laid, but then they never think about, it's like, what do you want your kids to be like? How do you want them to be raised? Do you want kids at all? Like to me, the idea of never wanting kids, that's like an idea of like self-castration. Doesn't seem masculine to me. And then if you do want kids, why would you want to do anything that could hurt them, that would screw them up? Like, divorce would be horrible. Infidelity would be horrible for them. All that kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's weird because so much of the masculinity sphere is built around this like notch count mentality. And it just seems so jacked up.
Yeah, they're pleasure seekers.
Right.
How is pleasure seeking masculine at all? I don't see a guy like that any different than an obese guy who brags about how much ice cream he ate. What's the big deal? You're running around having sterile transient sex so that you feel good about blowing your load in a bunch of broads. There's no pride in that. What's the pride in that? It's no different than a guy who's like, look at me, I ate all 37 flavors of ice cream. Are you proud about that, dude? You have no self-control.
Yeah. But so here's the counter to that. I think it would be something along the lines of like, well, men are only viewed for like what they can do. It's like, and there's like this bitterness and cynicism about how like men are just used and objectified in society. And it's like, what, you're going to tell me to provide more value? And just like they're angry about that. What do you think of that?
It is a natural instinct for man to be generative. And both genders do this, but women do it through childbearing. And so both genders are perverted in our culture because childbearing is looked down upon with women too. Their lives suck too. It's not just the men.
Right.
For a woman to be told to be a woman, which means be a wife and a mother, is highly looked down upon.
I know.
But in the same way that a woman, her value is what she can do too. You know what they used to call women that don't have babies? Barren. You're barren. So they made it so there's no more shame in that. But there was a time when there was a shame, when it was shameful. A woman without a baby? There was a time they whisper behind your back, she don't have any baby. She's barren. Oh, yeah. They'll talk shit about her. The same thing is for a man that's not generative. A generative man is a man that produces something, creates something, builds something. This is where the word generation comes from and generous comes from. For a man to be generative, which is the opposite of what? Degenerate. And our entire culture is purely degenerate. So if you're not being generative, you're being a degenerate. And if you're running around, I like to place this on people's table too, to think about the whole hookup and promiscuity culture. Take away contraception and abortion, and you tell me what your life is going to be like. They're playing a fake game. Chemically castrating women, blowing your nut in a bag, there's nothing manly about. It's still pleasure seeking. You know what a real man is? You want to be a real alpha male? You go out there and you make a bunch of babies with a bunch of different broads, and you take care of all of them like a king did back in the day.
Like
Have a
Elon
harem.
Musk, right?
Yeah. Yeah, have a harem and take care of all those kids rather than leaving them for Uncle Sam to take care of and for taxpayers.
Right.
So it's illogical, it's irresponsible, and it's weak.
Yeah. And so this is where I think probably you get a lot of pushback on your ideas, because it seems like these gender roles that you're talking about, they seem rather extreme. And so I wanted to ask you, how seriously do you take the gender roles? Because this is something I'm still trying to figure out. You know, I've got a daughter. She's only 3, so I got time, thank God. I know you got some older kids, right? Like you have at least one daughter, right?
3.
3. Okay.
Daughters.
So you got 3. Oh, okay. So I'm sure you're getting into this then. It's like, how enforced do you believe these gender roles should be? Like, should women only be thinking about motherhood? Should they not even think about career? Should, that, I guess that's the big one. It's like, what are women allowed to do in your philosophy?
It is our only salvation.
What?
A return to traditional gender roles, a return to tradition, a return to Christ is our only salvation. There's no other way around it. Anytime the progressive like to use the word progress, oh, we're progressing. To progress off the cliff is not to progress. We progress so far that we're retarded. We need a return. And so, you said that it sounds like the things I'm saying sound kind of radical. I don't know what you said, but there's nothing radical about natural law. There's nothing radical about moral law. There's nothing radical about how things were done for 2,000 years as the West built itself on the back of Christendom. That's what made us amazing. So it's just a return to what works rather than, this postmodern Marxist ideal that is leading us to a dystopian world that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. And so in your mentality, going back to that idea you were talking about before, where it's like, oh, if a woman was barren, it was like, it was really looked down upon. It was like, oh, there's something wrong with her. I mean, obviously women can't always control that, right? Say a woman isn't able to conceive. So what, in your perspective, should be her path?
A woman who can't conceive? Yeah. Just by her, there's probably going to be a whole lot of them coming up here in the next generation. We're being sterilized as we speak. I have this term that I heard reading this real old book one time. I thought it was pretty cool because, they're so based back in the day. They don't mince words. Misplaced maternal instinct. And so you're seeing a lot of that already right now with all these cat mamas. Oh, these are my fur babies, these cat ladies and whatnot. So a woman's need, her desire to nurture doesn't go away. It just gets perverted. And so even like the whole social justice movement, when we have social justice devoid of divine justice, we basically have feminism, BLM, LGBT marches through the street. It's misplaced maternal instinct, mostly led by women who they're not generative women. These aren't women with babies. Women with babies have better things to do. These women don't have children. So, but as far as like it just being like a scourge upon you, it's just like, man, like there's nothing I can do. You just can't have a baby. It's just life, that I don't know what to say. You figure it out. That's God's plan for you. So you figure out what you're going to do with that. Not every couple can have babies, but I tell you what, we live in a world where there are lots of children that could use help.
Yeah.
A lot of children are born into bad situations, right? Maybe not. You decide to help some of them, take care of them instead of just feeding your cat, maybe help some children. But, that's, I'm not putting my foot down on that one. That's, that's unique to everybody's situation.
Yeah, it seems like what it needs to be is that you need to find a place to put that energy. So for a woman, it's finding a way to utilize her nurturing aspect in some form or another. Maybe if, you don't have kids, then it's bringing it to your siblings' children, or like taking, there used to be nuns and things like that where they would go and then they would be they would try to be, spiritual mothers to, kids and stuff and raise them. And, to mixed success being a product of Catholic schooling. Some of the nuns were really great. Some of them, they were just bitter. And I think they didn't really choose the sisterhood so much as, they just couldn't find a man. And that bitterness didn't quite work. Didn't work in my favor, at least. But yeah, I think there's that spreading around that's important. But like, how far would you take it? Like, in your opinion, should women have careers, or should they just be entirely focused on, like raising kids?
Yeah, you should be at home. You should be making babies. You should be serving your husband. That's the most pleasurable life that you will ever live, because it's unnatural for a woman to want to climb the corporate ladder. That's not in her nature. The happiest women are the ones that are at home doing what they're built to do. Why would you want, in the garden after the fall, God cursed both man and woman. And so we know why we are right there. He said basically, or he explained to them, okay, now here's how your life is going to suck now, guys. And he says to Adam, you will have to work by the spread of your sweat of your brow. You're gonna toil. Now you have to go and work. And so Adam's like, oh man, no, please. I hope I shouldn't listen to my wife. Why is it that women want to take on a man's curse? We have to work. That's our vocation. That's what we're called to do. If we don't do that, we're of no value. If we don't work, why would you want to give up what gives you value, makes you unique, which is your superpower, which is to make babies, to then take on our responsibility, our work, and our curse to go out there and work? You will never be happy. This woman that created the TV show Sex and the City, I don't know if you've seen recently, there was a story about her, how she was a part of the whole promotion of women getting out there and being, carousel riders and climbing the corporate ladder and all that kind of crap. She now is an old barren bitch, and she admits this was a bad idea.
Wow.
This is a bad idea. She was a whole article about it. It was kind of going around on Instagram and stuff like that. And so She now admits I was wrong, but guess what? She trained up a generation of women.
Ooh, she did.
To give up what was best for what's worse. So I say these things out of love for women. I have 3 daughters, and I know how they'll be most happy. And of course, they hear what the culture says too. So I even have to kind of spell it out for them. But I just point to their mother. I just say, look at how happy your mother is. And then in contrast, look at your aunts, look at your friends' mothers, look at the neighbors' mothers, and look at your mother. Whose life would you rather have? Mom's. Well, why not live the way we live? Because it makes for a happy woman. Mm-hmm. These people that say, these guys, these simps that say happy wife, happy life, but yet they have their wife out there working, are stupid. Happy life. My wife is happy because she's being a wife. Happy wife is usually, when people say happy wife, happy life, is usually a disordered wife, happy life. We were at this meeting the other day. We went out just to this fundraiser, and this guy, we were talking about homeschooling because we've been homeschooling our kids, and it's been amazing. Don't send your kids to private school. You said private school? I'm telling you, don't send them because it's just as bad.
Really?
Maybe worse, because I already did it.
Really?
I sent them. Yeah, I sent them public school. I sent them private school.
Catholic
school?
Home.
Best thing ever.
Oh, wow.
Best thing ever. You got to do it. You got to figure out a way to make it happen. Anyway, this fool we were explaining to him what we do. And he was like, oh yeah, we really need to do it. And his wife is standing there next to him. And she's kind of feeling bad about herself. And then I'm like, well, does she work? And he's like, oh yeah, she full-time. She works full-time. I'm like, well, then you need to get her out of the workplace so that she can do that. He's blaming her. Try to convince my wife. He's telling my wife to convince his wife. I'm like, my wife works in the home, bro. My wife doesn't have to go get a job. How do you have your wife out there getting a job and then you want her to be a mom and a homeschooler? Because people got perverted thinking. They know what's right, but they do what's wrong.
Yeah. And it's obviously much harder today when you have a million different ideas about what's right. And it's, you don't have a strong social structure that's founded on principles that have worked for more than 20 years. And so people get confused. And so I'm curious, to the extent you feel comfortable talking about it, like, were you and your wife always on this page, or was this something that like had to evolve? Because you guys got married relatively young, right?
Yep.
So I imagine you've had quite the journey together, settling into, where you're at now.
We always been eye to eye, hip to hip. We always on the same path, she and I, 100%. Now, could our goals unfold over time? There's a time and there's a season for everything. We're always looking in the same direction.
That's awesome.
From the moment she got pregnant, and I said, we're going to have babies at home. We're not vaccinating our kids. We're going to do homeschooling. You're going to stay home. You're not going to have a career, right? These were all my proposals. I said, this is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. This. She's like, yes, dear. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. You know what that makes? Happy wife. Happy life. You know how a happy wife get a happy life? Listen to your husband. So she listens to me, and that's why she had a happy life.
I can already hear the feminists like screeching at the thought of that. What do you think about that idea is most repulsive to them?
Because they've been taught two strange things that contradict each other, but women can hold two contradictory ideas at the same time and have a hard time doing that. They've been taught to hate men. All men are toxic, men are tyrant, blah, 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 blah. And they want to be men. So if you have that kind of animosity towards somebody or something that you hate it, but I want it, there's a deep envy. Freud used to call it penis envy. And so that's really what they're struggling with. When these women are angry with men that like me, that are speaking like me, it's because they want to be me. I used to think, I would joke with my wife, I said, she wants me. I said, that's why she's like that. And then I realized, wait a second, she don't want me. She wants to be me, but she can't, no matter what. And so that hurts when you realize that. That's what these feminists are dealing with. You can't be me, baby. Just be what you are. You'll be so much happier. But, I can't blame them too, because men are weak. So here's the thing. For a woman to truly be happy, she gets to submit to the authority of a man. What a great place to be, where you don't have to make these kinds of decisions. You don't have to be the head. You can relax into your feminine. A woman who's relaxed into her feminine because she allows her husband to lead has better orgasms, because she can just lay back. Where was I going with that? But these hard up women, these hard ass women, the part of the reason why they become that way is because there's no strong men. Men have been taught not to be strong. They've been taught, and I remember being this way too myself. My dad, and I'm just lucky, by the grace of God, my dad is the way he is. So I woke up one day and I realized, oh my God, my dad's right. Well, I grew up thinking my dad was like toxic. Because my dad's like a tough guy and he's the leader. He's just, my dad's like old school masculine man. That's just the way my dad was. And I remember, learning in, school and the media, the whole gynocentric mindset. I used to, when I was a youth, I used to think, oh, my dad is wrong because he's so hardcore and blah, blah, blah. And then I was an effeminate man. I was a weak man. And I saw how that was leading me down the wrong way. And so I was so lucky that I had the model in my father that I could turn around and follow. And my dad has a great life and my mom has a great life. They have a great life together, but it's because my father is a strong masculine man instead of a flimsy slapdick. And so my mom follows his lead. My dad says something, my mom doesn't fight.
Yeah. And how much do you think the comfort factor in our society plays into the feminization of it? It's like, it's very, if the world were to go to shit, we were going to be in like a post-apocalyptic Mad Max world. How long do you think the principles of feminism would survive?
It would die immediately because it has nothing to rest on. It's made up. It's her imagination. The clouds burst when the shit hits the fan. That's it. All that imaginary shit, that's gone. There will be no more transgenders. There'll be no more feminists. All that will be gone.
Yeah.
We've reality.
We've gotten really good at living in virtual realities, whether, you're getting your sex from porn, your status from video games, your companionship from Netflix or whatever it is. It's just weird. We've created this new layer of struggle. Like there's like, prior to the modern age, the first layer of struggle for it seemed like man needed to overcome in order to find himself was just basic survival, right? Like if you are just fighting for your life, there's not a lot of room for, I think, the beauty of humanity to thrive, right? Like if you're just living in horrible conditions, it's going to be challenging to really to find the higher meanings in life, because you're just going to be like, well, where am I going to eat next? But in the modern world, it's like we flipped it on the head. It's like you're not going to find your life because you're too busy living this virtual life. And it's like coming back to like, well, what is real life, right? Like what is the thing that we should be focusing around? What do you think like a man should, like what should be his top priority in his life? Like what should he, like I'm going to abandon all this dumb fake bullshit for what?
The first thing is have a firm grasp on the fact that you're gonna die. And this was the organizing principle of our lives prior to carting off and sterilizing the idea of death. There was a time when we lived with death at our front door. You would kill your own chicken, you would kill your own cow, you would bury your parents in the backyard. If somebody's dying, they will die at home in their bed. Well, all that is sterilized. Also, we become sort of hardened against or jaded against death because we see it all the time on TV. Death, it's like expendable.
It's like impersonal too. It's just like, oh, another murder, another, shooting, another whatever.
Right. So when death is not at the door because you think that you're going to live in this flesh forever, you take everything for granted. So there's no organizing principle around YOLO, because it's basically do whatever you want to do while you're here, get what you want to get and go. Hang out. Thank you, my love. But when you have your mind on eternity, which is the way mankind thought for eons, until our postmodern time, I'd say probably around the French Revolution, probably shortly before that. This whole idea that you're just a bag of bones with blood and hair and teeth. You're just nothing, and you're just gonna go right back to the dust, and you're gonna die, and life doesn't mean anything. Then life sucks because it has no meaning. But if the organizing principle is I'm going to face death, and because scientifically energy doesn't dissipate or just transforms, I will be living in a different state. Some people call it heaven, and that there's a fate, and that it is practical to consider that there's a judgment. How did you live? What choices did you make? Did you receive the open doors, or were you stubborn and self-worshiping? There will be a judgment, and after the judgment, there will be an eternal hell. Your soul will live in a state in which it was trained the way you lived your life. You lived your entire life with greed and fear. Your soul will be crushed for eternity after it leaves this body in that state. Or did you work to mortify your flesh? Did you work to sanctify your soul? Did we work to create more virtue or more vice? And as a result, heaven, a higher state, an elevated state. This is, listen, you could hear me say this and say, oh, Elliott, that's pie in the sky thinking. But is it not more practical and a better way to organize one's life in order to make choices that are beneficial to you and to others? Then I'm just a bag of bones and I'm going to die, so I'm going to do whatever I want anyway.
Yeah.
So it's the practicality of that. Religion makes sense as an organizing principle for our lives.
Yeah. I agree. I tweeted this the other day. It was something along the lines of like, the true spirituality, true religion is the same thing as the pursuit of optimized neurochemistry. Like, if you think about like, how can I maximize the feel good neurochemicals that I get in my life, right? Like the first glance answer is like hedonism. It's like, I'm just going to do whatever feels the best. Well, it's like you do that, very quickly your life becomes a living hell. And it's like, okay, well, that's not the answer. So what is? And it's like what you're saying. It's like you have to learn how to work with your nature, understand your nature, work in harmony with other people and their natures, and pursue the greatest good that you possibly could. Literally it's like commandment number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and everything, right? You throw it all at God, which means your highest conception of the good. And if you don't do that, well, then you're going to be less happy than you could be. Bottom line, there is no other path. And we've lost that because, the atheist movement was really effective, in the 60s, 70s and onward. It's just like, oh, you're going to, worship this weird bearded dude sitting in a cloud. And it's gotten so ingrained in our culture that as soon as you start speaking in spiritual terms, people's brains shut off. It's like, oh, this moron. I kind of liked what he had to say until he started mentioning God. And it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, I imagine you've gotten quite a bit of that since you've become more vocally Christian.
Yeah. I've always spoke about God. I've always been a seeker.
But the Christian stuff seems newer. And that's something I wanted to ask you about because, I've been on my own journey. I was raised Catholic, and then, a lot of, because of the sexuality stuff, it's like, oh, you can't do this or you'll go to hell. It's like, well, I don't see any option. You're not telling me how to deal with my sexuality. So I go into porn and, it seems like, it works or whatever. And then in college, I got into Eastern religions, studied Buddhism, Hinduism, got really into the occult for a period. And around the time that I quit porn, I had my reversion to Catholicism, and I'm practicing Catholic now. And so it's interesting to me to see you. You got like Saint Joseph behind you. You got all that stuff. So can you tell me a little bit about like what your spiritual journey looked like?
It looks a lot like yours, bro. And they say when the tide comes in, all boat rise. It's a zeitgeist, right? It's God's pattern. There's this movement I see on YouTube. A lot of people talking about the chosen ones. But in a way, there's some sort of truth to that. It's like, well, God had us written on it. He was written in our hearts from the beginning, especially as Catholics, because you were baptized. I never understood the value of infant baptism until I reverted to the faith because of the grace that comes along with it. So many graces that I didn't realize were there my entire life as a byproduct of my infant baptism. But my journey was a lot like yours. I hit a point in my life where I was struggling, but it was because of my own self-worship. I got to a point where I was deep into the new age. It wasn't working for me, right? I had to try it out like everything else. And that's the good and the bad of the time that we live in, because we have so many options. Our parents were Catholic because they had no other choice. I was like, well, what else is there? It doesn't make any sense. But I grew up, the internet came out and I was like, wow, I discovered all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So it's good and it's bad, but it gave me an opportunity to try all kinds of stuff. And it led me down the path that it will always lead you down when you go new age, which is self-worship. This whole idea that my thoughts, my feelings, my mission, my purpose, me. It's me.
That's what the goddess stuff is. That's what the goddess stuff is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
Right.
It's all effeminate too. It's all of the same thing, man. It's all very feminine. And so I was there, very feminine, and then when that happens, you start looking for meaning in all kinds of stupid stuff like omens. And I'm like, oh, I saw an owl today. And I go and look on it. Look up, what does that owl mean? Because you really lose your mind in that shit. Because when you worship yourself, then anything goes. And it's a slippery slope into psychosis. And that's where I found myself. Smoking weed all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, weed'll, you combine, it seems like that's a pattern I've seen really screw up some lives, where it's like you go down the new age, you couple it with weed, especially like, from what I understand, I've only ever known the modern weed, but apparently before the modern weed, it wasn't quite so potent. But now it's like extremely psychoactive. And if you're just puffing on that stuff all day, doing the new age stuff, you will not be yourself for very long. I've seen multiple people in my life close to me have extreme psychotic breaks from that.
Yeah, that happened to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, that happened to me. That's where I was, probably like 2016, 17, 18. I got to a point where I worked real hard for a long time. I started my family very early. I started my business very early. While most of my friends were jerking off, I was building, right? I started in my early 20s, and I would never do it the other way. But as a result, I hit the wall when I was like in my early 30s. Like by 34, I was like, boom. I was like, oh man, I need a break. Never smoked weed a day in my life. Never smoked weed a day in my life. Maybe a day. But I was never into weed.
Yeah.
I turned 34, it was about 34, 35 years old. I was like, man, I just need a break. Let me just start smoking some weed. Next thing you know, I was smoking weed. I was doing yoga. I grew my hair out. I became a hippie. I was allowing myself to do that because I was like, in a way, I thought I deserved it, right? That's an effeminate way of thinking. Oh, I deserve this. I thought I deserved it, and I was giving myself a break, but it became a trap. That word slippery slope is fascinating because you go down fast, but it's not easy to come back up.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. When did you have like that turning point when you realized, man, I've been had, like I'm in a bad spot. I need to switch.
I got, you're right. It's so funny. I've been had, damn it. And that's why I'm so adamant about a lot of the things that I say. I sound, a lot of people are like, Elliott, why are you so aggressive about the things that you say? I'm like, wait, because I've been had. And I don't want to see it happen to you. I love the way you say that. Bro, it literally was, man, by the grace of God, so many different things. But my father-in-law, well, he was not a well man, my wife's father. And he was an alcoholic, and he lived a hard life. His wife, my wife's mother, she was a mess, just bad stuff. And he got to a point where he injured himself at work, and he ended up like real sick in bed at home, and he was basically dying in his bed by himself. And then so my sister-in-law went and brought him to Florida, like to try to help him out. And he came here and he was getting better little by little. He was still in the hospital. He had liver problems. He was just very sick and frail. And they thought he was on the mend. And then one night, I'm sleeping in bed and I hear God's voice. I don't know if it's God. I don't know if it's an angel. I don't know what it is. You call it whatever you want. My subconscious. But something spoke to me in a dream, or the voice is clear as day saying, you, talking to me, and Guy, which is her father's name, you and Guy are about to make Colleen very miserable. Colleen's my wife. I woke up, I popped up, and I was like, whoa, wait, what? You're about to make her very miserable. And I love my wife. I don't want to make her miserable. That's not what I would. I live my life to make her life pleasurable. And so that instant, that day, Colleen thought it was crazy. I popped out of bed. I started making changes right away. I was like, all right, this needs to change, that needs to change. And so I started making like superficial changes around the house and between us. I was like, we got to stop this. I got to stop that. And so that very same day that I received that message and turned around, her father died. And then this sense of responsibility just descended upon me. I've always been a responsible husband and father. I take care of my kids. I do everything for my family. But for the first time, the truest sense of the word father was imprinted on my heart. And I began to understand my vocation as a husband and why a father gives his daughter away, because we then become like our wife's father. I know this world doesn't like to hear that, but a woman is given away in marriage. That's why in the Bible it says they were marrying and being given away in marriage. What does that mean? It means men marry, women are given away in marriage, because a woman is to be under her father's authority until she's given in marriage. And so, of course, we, as fathers, we give up responsibility to our daughters. By the time they turn 18, we throw them out to the whorehouse at the college campus. But when you do it the right way, I'm responsible for my daughter's chastity. I'm responsible for her protection, her provision. You're responsible for your daughter until you give her to another man and say, now you protect her, you provide for her. And but of course that's very odd in our world right now. But I got that sense it just poured down on me on that day that I knew I was responsible, but I didn't know to what extent until that day. And so it was, in many ways, it was a process of returning to my father, because I began to really see him for what he has been and what he was. I was able to see him. I was able to take off my gynocentric lenses and see my father. And then it was a journey back to the father, because I started fasting. And I just got the sense that I need to fast. And so I started fasting at that time too. And in my seeking out spiritual support for fasting, I came across the writings of the Desert Fathers and the patristic writings of the early church. And it was a lot of orthodoxy, right? I was like, that's because they still talk a lot about fasting. And so I'm reading, the Philokalia and all these kinds of books and stuff, and doing the Jesus prayer, right? And I'm like, because that's a part of the fasting. Do the prayer of the heart, breathe in, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And so I'm doing that, I'm praying that. And then one day, one day I just had this heaviness on my heart that I needed to repent. All of a sudden, all my sins of the past started just coming into my mind. Like all the things that I did that I forgot I did, or I never thought anything about it. It was like, oh, what's the big deal? Everybody does that. All of a sudden, like God is convicting me. I'm just sitting there one day and I'm being convicted. I started crying. I'm like, I'm a terrible person. I'm not as great as I thought I was. And I used to fool myself because, people send me emails or they comment, oh, Elliott, you changed my life. Oh, Elliott, you're so great. Oh, so I really believed that shit. And I sat there that day and I was like, I am a terrible person. And so in that, I was prompted to go to confession. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time, because I hadn't gone to confession since I was like 12 years old or something when I did, my first confession. That was like my first and my last confession. I went back to that. I went to religious instruction. And I didn't even know where the nearest Catholic parish was. I didn't even know what a sacrament was. But I just knew that I needed to go see a priest and I needed to repent. I needed absolution is really what I needed. I needed that reconciliation with God the Father. And in that moment, I remembered I was Catholic. I was like, wow, I actually can just show up at the church. I don't have to go, like if I was Orthodox, I would have had to like go through their rite of initiation or whatever.
Right.
And being Protestant is so empty. Protestant, they don't offer any kind of sacraments. They don't offer anything except the book, Bible. And they made up their own Bible anyway. And so it's not like I knew I can go there and I can receive Christ. Catholics, we receive Christ in our body. We receive absolution in Christo through the priest. There's all kinds of beautiful sacraments that are available to us. I didn't know anything about that. I took it all for granted. And I went there that day and I confessed. I poured out my heart. I gave him like 34 years of sins, and my life changed in that instant. I went to mass every single day for the rest of that year. And I love it. I love the faith. It's such a deep faith. It's such a beautiful faith. It is so intelligent, even though it's been dumbed down. All the greatest minds have, in some way, shape, or form, either how would you say, in some way, shape, or form, either directly or indirectly, come out of the Catholic faith. I mean, Catholics created the first universities in the West.
Right. Yeah, Catholicism, it's interesting. Like I fully identify as Catholic. I practice, all that kind of stuff. But it enrages me in some ways too, because it's a lot of it's been so feminized. There's obviously all the scandal, which is horrible. And it's like, one of the things that I wonder, it's like if the Catholic Church, like, apparently, like, this is my understanding, I could be wrong on this, but it didn't always used to be where you had to be celibate in order to be a priest. They actually cut that out, from my understanding, because they didn't want like cardinals passing on stuff to their sons. They didn't want like nepotism in the church. And so they said, all right, now you can't get married anymore. But I feel like the what that has led to is basically a priesthood, a leadership that in itself has kind of disconnected itself from its masculinity, and this has, been taken further with, like, I think it's like making it far more accessible, like putting all this like folk music in it and everything like that. I feel like it's, the church needs to refine its masculinity if it's going to serve its purpose. It's become soft. Like, it's crazy to me that like the Pope, I'm not supposed to speak bad about the Pope, but at the same time, it's like you have the ability to reach more people than ever before, and you just like seem to like talk in riddles half the time, and like don't take strong stances, and like don't lead us where we need to go out of this modern hellhole. And it, I don't know. Do you have any? Do you share any of those feelings at all, or am I alone in that?
All of them. Are you aware though of the infiltration into the church?
Well, I read an interesting book by Milo Yiannopoulos that he's actually a pretty impressive writer, talking about like the lavender mafia in the church, basically like the ring of homosexual, like deviant cardinals and bishops and stuff like that who seem to have installed. So what do you mean by that?
It's an infiltration. So there's Bella Dodd, who speaks openly about it, who was a Marxist, about how them through the Freemasons, who have always been the main enemy of the church, infiltrated the church. They knew that in order to pervert the world, you got to pervert the church. And the only way that they're going to pervert the church was from inside out. And so they had 1,500 homosexuals infiltrating the seminaries in the 1960s. Late 1950s, early 1960s. They selected these men purposefully for their corruptive natures. And so all of the scandal that you're experiencing, all of the breakdown of the liturgy that happened after Vatican II, all of the effeminacy that you're experiencing, all of this, it was a plot by the enemy to get these men into the seminaries in order to have them rise into prominence and positions of power to take down the church from the inside. And you could see it because prior to this, the priests were very manly men. They were tough guys. You think about the old Irish priests from Boston, and these tough Italian old dudes. They're all sissies right now. And what happens when you get a bunch of sissies? We know this about the homosexuals. They hire more sissies because they're a gang. And so you got from the 1960s up until today, you had a bunch of homos who infiltrated the church, and all they do is promote and hire more homos. So that's how they destroyed the priesthood.
That would make sense. And it's like there seems to be a lot of evidence, like if you read into it, that does support that. And so the question for me is like, they're the ones who wield the power in the church. So it's like, is this one of those things like for me, I'm at the stance of like, all right, I do what I can in my work. I try to instill masculine values. I try to help guys, actually equip themselves with the ability to live a moral life in this crazy modern world. But at the same time, it's like we need spirituality, but it's almost like it's tough for me to recommend Catholicism to guys because it's like you're probably going to go get this homily by this like priest who's half asleep, who's like, like if we're gonna just look at it in just like pure marketing terms, and you're a great marketer, you understand how that works. It's like, that priest that you're recommending the guy go see, he's competing with, TikTok, YouTube, like all these people who take their presentation very, very seriously, and they're going to see this half asleep priest with songs sung by someone who can't even sing in key, and they're just like, what is this shit? Like, I don't want any part of this. And it's just like, what do you do? Just like, to me, I'm just like, it's in your hands, God. I don't know what else to do at this point.
A number of things. Are you aware of the traditionalist movement within the church?
I've heard of it, like the return to like the Latin Mass and stuff like that.
Latin Mass, SSPX, SSPS. There's a bunch of different priestly organizations that have returned to tradition within the church, and it's a growing movement. And in fact, a lot of the Novo Ordos masses are being now led by very manly priests. There's a movement in the same way in the world that men are like returning to masculinity, which is evident through guys like you and me. It's happening in the church as well, but you got to look for it.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things that I tell, and of course it's a lot around the Latin Mass, and they try to shut that down because Benedict was a big Latin Mass promoter and pusher, and they started to understand, they started to realize that, well, this guy he's gonna turn the church back to be manly again, because that's what happens when you go back to Latin. The men come back. You get rid of all the gay music and you go back to Gregorian chants and stuff, and the men come back. And that's very scary for those who are running the church right now, who are essentially Freemasons. I think the Pope there's a good likelihood he's a Freemason. He was installed, right? And so we're kind of in this place where they say there's two popes. And so supposedly, but Benedict was a traditionalist. And so the minute he started promoting the traditionalists, all of a sudden they had to get rid of him. And so they got, we got what's his name in there now, Bergoglio.
Right.
And so Bergoglio's he's clearly a globalist.
I mean, everything he does seems to make me think that, yes. How do you think how did they get rid of Benedict? Do you have any idea around that? Like, you might be more versed on the conspiracy side of that.
He made some mistakes, but they pinned the scandal on him like it was his fault.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess it's like, you made an interesting point earlier in our conversation saying that like religion, it always was like started like by men, pretty much for men. And we live in a world today where it's the exact opposite. Right? Like we live in a world today where it's like, women are the ones who go to the church primarily. Right? And they're the ones who are passing it on to their kids more than like, I'm lucky. Both my parents, were very, devout in their faith, and they modeled it for me. And that's, one of the main reasons why I came back is because like, man, you guys are better people than I'm being right now. So you got at least something on me, in all my enlightenment, you got something on me. So that model was really powerful for me. But I think that's what like the next stage of thing has to be for the building back of masculinity, because without a spiritual root, masculine power, it just becomes this chaotic thing. And this is what you kind of see with, at least what I kind of see with like the MGTOW movement, with the incel movement. Both of those are backlashes against femininity, but they're angry. They have no direction. They have no generativity other than, they're just looking for, how can I get mine, right? How could I get mine? Right. And it's just, there needs to be this return to spirituality. So how much of that is tied into what you're trying to accomplish with your work now?
Everything. I can't be the leader. I'm a fallen man. Don't follow any man who doesn't have a divine authority, right? This is where we get into hero worship and politician worship, which leads us to Antichrist, which is the entire culture. The entire culture is Antichrist because we worship men. We worship ourselves, and we worship and look for and respect men. But if a man doesn't have an authority above him, which is divine, then he's a useless man to follow. So the whole idea of kings, especially biblical kings, and this even Egyptian kings, the whole idea of a king, and it's a shame that we got rid of monarchy and kings, and I'll tell you why. Because a true king is one that is graced by divine power. The only reason why anybody would give their allegiance to a king is if they believed that he was being led by God, because they believed that he was the axis mundi through which God poured divine grace into the world. With the removal of God the Father, the removal of divine kings, there's no leadership. So we end up worshiping Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or Bill Gates or the CDC or celebrities, LeBron James, or you see what I'm saying? We make up our own kings. We make up our own idols, and we worship these fallen creatures and creations. So to go back, the only way back is the way up. And that means men must look up and we must return to the Father. The whole return is the return to the Father. The return of the King is the return of the Father. And is a return to the Father.
Yeah. Amen. And I guess that makes sense then when you put it like that. And I know you have like your whole King program and stuff. And I imagine that's what it's about. It's about how to bring all the facets of your life back into alignment with that idea you just shared. Is that right?
Yeah. The organizing principle, the pattern of our lives. Everything else is fallen. Everything else is dust. Everything else is matrix. Where is the pattern within the matter? And the pattern, that's what spirit means. Spirit is pattern. God the Father, that's what Father means, pattern. And so we have to return to that. We have to return to that divine pattern. And it's beautiful because patterns are objective. God is so good that he objectively inserts his law into our hearts. He transcribes it onto our hearts and into a book. It's the Bible. So we don't have to question. We don't have to worry. We don't have to make it up ourselves. It's all right there. Right. And the 2,000 years of tradition that the Catholic Church brings us in understanding those words. Because, Protestants, they read the Bible and make up whatever they want. They say, whatever I want. It means whatever I want it to mean. That's why you got like 37,000 different denominations.
Right.
But there's a tradition. There's from the apostles, there's an apostolic tradition from the days of Christ that follows through in the church. And the church is not always perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're the body of Christ. And so the body's trying to follow the head, but the body is fallen. The head is connected to the divine, to the Father. But the body, my will is strong, but my body is weak. The body is weak, so it'll make mistakes. But if we do believe that it is the body of Christ, it is always being led and being given revelation through our head, which is Christ, and God the Father through him. So even these things like, I know you questioned earlier about the priesthood and celibacy. A lot of these things that people just look at the church and they say, oh, they just made that up. Why'd they start doing that? They just made that up after the Bible, not realizing that the church gave us the Bible. After the Bible, they understand that tradition is revelation. A lot of tradition is revealed, and it's revealed over time. And so even though it's not in the Bible, as first thing Protestants say, oh, it's not in the Bible, it's not biblical. They don't realize that but the body of Christ receives revelation from its head, which shows us the meaning of things and helps develop things for us as we mature, if you could call it that, here in this life.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, the reason why I rail against that part of the priesthood is because part of me is like, man, I could do it. I would do it, but I can't. I knew I was called to marriage and that sort of thing. And then I guess it's like, me personally, I hate complaining about something that I feel like I could affect. It's like, if I felt like I could affect that more.
But you could. The laity, and this is a part of the good part of Vatican II, was to empower the laity to be the light into the world. That's what Lumen Gentium was all about. And so for us to be the light of the world means that we have power as laymen to create apostolates, right? Like, so for example, you want more manly priests? Well, then you support manly young men that want to be into the priesthood. You help them pay for it. You help mentor them. That's if I could do one thing, that may be what I end up doing at some point. But like, just a call to vocations for all manly young men who want to transform the church from the roots up.
Yeah. Well,
and that's what will be required.
That's one of the things I've really been thinking about. Like, I have some guys who have gone through my programs, quit porn, and then they built their own men's groups in their churches. And they just have had, fantastic success with that. And it's like, man, part of me wants to build like my own, like a new, like masculine order, but it's almost like it's tough because those guys who are doing that, they're not Catholic. And it's like, I want it to be Christian. Obviously there'd be a lot more power if I could be just Catholic, but that's what there needs. There needs to be like orders. There needs to be fraternities. There needs to be brotherhood. It's like, you speak of the Masons. It's like there needs to be a counter Masons kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
That's what the Jesuits were.
Were.
Were. Yeah, the Catholics created the Freemasons are an ape of the church. They stole the idea of fraternity and orders and brotherhood from the church, and they created their own demonic version of it, and then turned everybody else gay. So all of the Catholic orders and stuff, they're all weak. Most of them are weak. But I hear you, and I think you might be onto something. Well, there may be a new order. Like, isn't that what always changed the church? Like, think about the Dominicans, right? They came out of Dominic, right? Like, he transformed the church with just his devotion to the rosary. Right. And also then it was Ignatius who created the Society of Jesus that became the Jesuits. And then the Carmelites. I mean, it's all these orders that really, the Franciscans, think about St. Francis. It's all these orders that created the deep change in the church. Maybe it's time for a new order.
And, I think you're right. And I think the thing that another thing that frustrated me about the church is that there is so few examples of a married man as like a saint, right? Like you had Saint Joseph, obviously, but that's not a normal guy, and that's not a normal marriage. It's the idea of, at least in Catholicism, the tradition is that he remained perpetually celibate, right? So it's like, man, that guy didn't even have sex. How am I going to look up to him for help around that kind of stuff? And it's like, there's just not that many. And that's what I feel is needed is married men, right? Like they're kind of like the thing that leads the nucleus. Like I would say women are the center of like human life. They're the center, but the men are like the perimeter. They form like the outer part of it. And so it's like that part has been broken. And because of that, families, individuals, pretty much everyone, like if you live in a masculinely weak culture, you live in a culture of submission. Like you have no defense because that's what you need. That's what masculinity's for. It's about drawing lines and saying, no, you can't cross that line because I'm not going to let you. And without that, you're basically going to become destroyed by whoever is masculine, right? They're going to come in. They're going to set the rules. But today it's become so subtle. Like yes, they're an extremely masculine culture. They're not going away anytime soon. Like the left goes and tries to pull their stuff there. Good luck, And
they don't like you either.
Yeah. So it's like, in a way, that's why I think like Donald Trump was so interesting, because it was like he almost gave culture permission to push back. He gave guys permission. You get up there, and he's just like, nah, screw you guys, you're full of it. And he just like unabashedly, macho, alpha, whatever. And then from there, myself included, I felt more comfortable doing it, because it was just like before that, it was just like you'd get shit on like real hard. It's like you need, because it's like we didn't realize how overwhelmed, like we didn't realize how intense the flood was, I don't think, until it was like it felt too late, and we needed someone to like pierce that veil. I know you were supporting Trump for a while, and that was kind of like when you came back with like this kind of new attitude and everything. Where do you stand on that guy now?
I like what he stands for. I like his attitude. He reminds me of my dad. That's the first thing I thought. I was like, that guy talks like my dad. Just straight up, just blunt, doesn't really care what you think. And I was like, that's a very alpha attitude. And so I like that. I like him. I do have hangups, though, with American politics. And I don't think that he's there by accident. I don't think he's as much of an outsider as they make it seem that he is. I think he was installed and is... he was there for a number of reasons, but one of which was to pull out or to create division so that they can see who's who in the political sphere. Almost like you have to have like the counter revolutionaries. You have to have.
You think he was like controlled opposition kind of thing?
That's the word I'm looking for. You got to be able to point out the enemy. And so it allowed us to separate ourselves. But really, what the separation was? It was masculine versus feminine, because as soon as he came out, that's when the Me Too thing started happening, and it basically was polarizing male against female. And then it points to, this is part and parcel of why I believe that women voting is a bad idea. Because what happens is when you allow women to vote, you destroy gender relations, particularly in the family. Because a family should have a vote. Because if you have the mother and the father, you have the husband and the wife voting differently within the family, then you have divergent values within the nucleus of a society. You can't have that. Each family should have one vote, and the father is the head. But then when you split the vote and you start pandering to the different values, the female values, which is, open borders, egalitarianism, socialism, everything that's woke is female. That's feminine. It's all gynocentric. It all comes from feminism. Every bit of wokeness, there's not an ounce of masculinity in it. Anybody who's woke is a female man. But the only reason why you can have a woke movement is if you give power to woke values, which is woman values. And when you give credence to woman value in the political sphere, you split things up to such that we have right now, where it's essentially man versus woman. Capitalism represents patriarchy and masculinity. Even Christianity is on that side of things. Versus communism, egalitarianism, BLMism, LGBTism, all that is on the other side.
Right. Yeah. It's you can see it. It's become so polarized. It really is. I guess that's the thing, is like the ultimate configuration of polarity is male versus female. Like that is what it is, right? Yep. And the thing that I'm seeing that's not it's like to prevent the male versus female from just like destroying each other or just being constantly at war, there needs to be a unifying principle. And I think that's where that whole faith idea comes back. That's what allows the male and female to actually operate in service and love to each other rather than being at war with each other.
Better than unity is order.
Can you say more about that?
Better than unity, because order is vertical, and the vertical axis is masculine. Unity is lateral. The lateral axis is feminine. And so, of course, we're in this world, United States, we live in, it's all that. And so there's this whole idea of being united. But to be united means nothing if it's disordered unity, right? This whole idea that, we're all in this together. Remember they were saying that during COVID? We're not in this together. I'm not in this with you. I subscribe to a totally different order than you do. What we need is a unified order. And with order is hierarchy. It's not egalitarian. Masculinity is hierarchical. Nobody likes to hear that, but that's the way it is. That's our nature, and that's why we are the leaders. That's why the world has always been that way, and it always falls apart when it becomes egalitarianism. So unity is an overplayed gynocentric wokeism. What we need now is order, divine order. God in Christ, Christ over man, man over woman, woman over children. We need that again.
So how do you sell women on that?
You get to stay home, be cared for, make babies, nest, and live a great life where you serve your husband and your children. Any woman who does that right now, if she got a legitimate voice in the media, she would sing its praises. This is what my wife does.
I guess
Why would you want anything else? Well, but they've been fed a lie. They've been fed this lie that your value as a woman is contingent upon how well you behave like a man. That's what they tell them. So the more you can be an entrepreneur or a corporate CEO or a scientist or an engineer, all that shit, or a professional athlete, the schools, because it's all a great ideological subversion through the media and the schools and shit like that, has taught women that that's what your value is in. All of those are masculine traits. So feminism is the most anti-female sentiment that there possibly is. Because if feminists truly loved women, they would say, exercise your greatest gifts and develop your greatest virtues as a woman. A woman's power is subtle but strong. Every man does what he does. Why? For a woman. Why wrestle with men when you can seduce? Not with your sex, but with your sweetness. But they've been not taught that they've been taught that that's not strength, that's weakness.
Right.
But because they don't really understand women.
Right. And it's like right now, women, they see that, especially young women. It's like, why would I give up like all my Instagram likes? Why would I give up, the ability to have, sex, power, independence, all that kind of stuff for raising kids? Raising kids is like really hard. Like, I don't want to do any of that.
They're going to be miserable.
Yeah. They wake up around like 33.
Any old feminist. They're not happy.
Yeah. It's an undoing that's going to have to, it'll be quite a thing. I think it's just going to be mostly a society in crisis, a whole generation in crisis to really wake people up. And it'll be sad and interesting to watch. But in the meantime, it's like, we men, we gotta be willing to speak up for what we believe is true. We gotta be willing to engage in discourse. Even if, if a guy's listening to this, you disagree with this, well then talk about it. Let's actually, let's have some conversation. Talk to other guys who think like this. Like, actually make your points. Like, engage in logical debate, not just like, stupid, mudslinging and all that kind of crap. But the thing I wanted to ask you about in relation to that was because you've gotten a fair share of hate, a fair share of criticism online. There's so many different videos talking about the rise and fall of Elliott Hulse and all that kind of stuff. How do you handle that? How have you come to deal with that level of criticism?
I love it. I love it. It fuels my fire because it means I'm saying something. If you're not pissing somebody off by noon every day, one of my mentors says, then you're not saying enough. You got to say something. You got to say something worth criticizing. If I'm just saying what everybody else is saying and I'm being a nice guy about it, then you don't make that you're useless. You're just going with the flow. They say that the only thing that goes with the flow are things that are dead, right? Like a dead branch in the river. It goes with the flow, right? But if you're alive, you fight against the current. You don't go with the current thing. The current carries dead things. And so it just gives me, here's a number of things. It gives me conviction. It strengthens my conviction. It gives me a sense that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, because as Christ says, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. And so I align myself with that sentiment. Good. Okay, good. Then it needs to be expected that I'm going to be hated. And if they love me, that means that I got to be aware. I got to be a little careful. If you love everything I'm saying, that means I'm going wrong somewhere, because that means I'm either pandering or I'm not thinking. One or the other.
Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful thing. The worst thing in terms of marketing is being ignored. And so I don't like being ignored, but I don't mind being criticized. So the more criticism, the better. I go seeking out criticism so that I know that people are listening and disagreeing. That means that, okay, I'm rubbing salt in the wound, and so something's happening. And that's usually a good thing, because the sentiment I receive more than any is, Elliott, at first I thought you were XYZ and I couldn't stand you. But then a year later, I grew up, or my girlfriend dumped me, or I got off of weed, and I listened to you again, and oh my God, you were right the whole time. All right, good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you get a ton of that. I imagine you probably also get some of this, which is what I found, like when I was doing some research for this chat, like, you had the people who knew you from like the earlier strength camp days, where you're just like talking about lifting and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I loved you, but you really fell off, man, which means like you disagreed with me or something. Like, and I feel like there's people, like, this whole creator economy, this influencer economy, like you're one of the OG like online influencers, and people don't know like what it's like to try and build and run a brand, like to run a business. It's like they don't want to, as soon as you do something they like, they don't want you to ever stop it, or else they're going to be furious, because they like almost like build you as like this, like part of their like psychological organism. They like want you to be this certain thing because they're relying on you for this certain thing. And then when you go on your own journey, they freak out. They get mad about it. They like, send negativity your way. And so, I guess like from one creator to another, like I've been doing this for a while now, even though I'm younger than you. I started like 8 years ago, I think, on YouTube, 8 or 9 years ago. And, I've changed. I was starting hardcore, just porn addiction. Then I, started to branch out into, self-development, masculinity, all this other stuff. I had a phase where I used to like, I had a mustache and I wore this little hat and I would like put on this character. It's like you try stuff out, you do things, you move, you evolve. And I guess, what has that been like for you to have so much of your evolution be in the public eye? Has it ever been hard for you, or are you just one of those people who naturally have like extremely thick skin?
Well, I would say that changing like this is bad for business. There's no question about it. It's bad for business because if you want to market to the masses, you got to be consistent with what you want them to think you are. That's good marketing. That's smart marketing. That is, stick with your message, stay with it. And this is why like McDonald's and, Coca-Cola, it's the same thing. Right. They didn't change. They may come up with a new spin on it, but then they go back to the same thing. That's the best way to do it. When you have a winning formula, you stick with it. But I'm not a Hollywood creation, right? Like if I was a Hollywood creation or like a WWE wrestler, right? Like, I remember watching Hulk Hogan in the 80s. And then, he lives in Clearwater here. So I see Hulk Hogan. He's an old man dressed just like Hulk Hogan, looking exactly the same, talking the same way with the same mustache. That's a Hollywood creation, right? That's a Vince McMahon creation. But you know what I mean? It's a Hollywood creation. You and I, we're not Hollywood creations. I'm just a dude. And that's what the internet created. That's what YouTube created. Nobody trained me in how to be a celebrity.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody trained us how to do it. You and I, we're just guys. I'm just a guy with a camera. Right? I got no training in this. I have no family. I have no connections. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just me. I'm just putting myself on camera. And so as a result, I break a lot of those laws, which is, hey, you're confusing the market. 1 minute you're this and the next minute you're that. But then I'm like, wait a second. But doesn't everybody change?
Right. Yeah.
Not unless you're a creation. And so you know what I found though? That by just allowing myself to change, there was a time when I was upset with myself because like I realized what I was doing. I'm turning off my market. I'm losing. I lost a lot. They're so funny because they think that I'm like chasing the market. A lot of times they're like, oh, Elliott's just doing that because it's trendy, or Elliott's just, he
went MAGA because he's trying to, yeah.
But what they don't realize is like, bro, I lost 80% of my market each time I change. I'm not chasing anybody. I'm literally just being myself and everybody's leaving. If I wanted the market, I would have kept doing what they wanted me to do from the beginning. I'm just being myself.
Yeah.
But what is beautiful though, is those who do change and their evolution follows your evolution. So you'll have these people who are like, wow, it almost seems like you and I were on the same path. I was into New Age and then I became Catholic. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was into this and then I was into that. And it seemed like just you were doing the same thing. So in a way, that's a form of leadership to a particular group of people who are evolving too. Yeah,
it is. I mean, like for me, it's an inspiration for sure to see that. I see your new profile picture on Instagram. You got like a collar shirt on and a suit. Is that a sign of another change coming?
Yeah, I don't know if I like that picture so much, but I'm trying. Yeah, I'm trying stuff out.
Yeah,
I'm trying something out. I want to be grown up, Elliott.
Grown up, Elliott.
I'm going for a grown up. I want to look wealthy. I want to look rich. I want to look professional.
Yeah,
and so I'm trying out that kind of uniform. I think I might just stick with my green collar shirt because from day one, old Uncle E been wearing camo and green. That's just me, and I feel more comfortable in this. I tried that. I tried the blazer on, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't. I know I'm doing what I want to do, but I'm like, I don't think I nailed it just yet.
Right.
So
It takes time to dial that stuff in. It really does. Like, for the branding side of things, it's fun, it's interesting, but it also becomes like this moral thing today too. It's like, how do you balance, like, clicks with morals and nuance? Because obviously, you can just say something outrageous, non-nuanced, you can get a bunch of clicks and, engagement from it, but you don't want to be inauthentic. So I'm curious, how do you think about that? Like when it comes to getting known, getting your thoughts out there, and still being like completely true to who you are?
I'm just having fun.
That's a perfect answer.
I'm just having fun. If it's not fun, that's when I'm being inauthentic. When I'm trying, then I'm like, this is not working out well. But if I'm having fun along the way, if I'm laughing, because I'll make some videos that are ridiculous. I'll say just some triggering shit. And if I watch myself later and I giggle, then I'm like, okay, that was good. Even though if everybody hated it, if it made me laugh, I'm like, that was great.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna have to start stealing that. So these last couple questions, I know you're busy here, and I really appreciate all the time you've given us. This one's kind of selfish. Like, who are your biggest business mentors that you like look up to?
Well, it changes over time. Like I was a big Brian Tracy fan, like back when I would listen to his CDs, right? That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
I would listen to CDs about sales. Like, my first quote unquote business was just being a salesman in personal training.
Yeah.
I was a personal trainer sales. Then I discovered Dan Kennedy. I was a big Dan Kennedy fan. Can't say I ever stopped being a Dan Kennedy fan. I still love his work. I still love his stuff. He's the OG, grumpy old Dan. He's great.
Right.
Love his stuff. There have been those that have come and gone over time. I never really been like, into following business gurus. I'm liking Grant Cardone's stuff right now, though. I just downloaded a couple of his books on Audible, and I'm like, I just like he's abrasive, fast talking. He's just a hardcore style. So I'm like, I like this guy. I know he's been around for a while, but I just never got around to listen to his stuff. And so the other day I was like, let me download one of this guy's books. And I was like, he's awesome.
Yeah. I just read his book, actually, Be Obsessed or Be Average. I'm like, yeah. I needed someone to tell me that it was okay to just be obsessed. Like here I was, like it was weird. It was like I had this idea. It's like, well, you need to have at least minimum 2 hours a night watching Netflix, or else you're gonna suffer burnout. And I just like cut all that shit out, and I'm just like, it's great.
Yeah. I'm actually listening to that right now.
Yeah, it's good.
I love it. Yeah, it's good. I needed that kick in the ass from him, so I'm enjoying his stuff.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Is there any last things you want to tell anyone, like where to find you, anything you got going on? I saw you just like you had Golden Age Reps or Golden Era Reps program on your Instagram. I actually just got it because I was interested in it. It looked similar to some like Dorian Yates style stuff I got in the past, and I wanted to see if that's like the angle you took to it. So let me know what you got.
Thank you for picking that up. I actually I helped a friend publish that because he's big into HIT training. His name is Jay Vincent. Of course you know because you probably read the sales page. Real smart kid. He knows what he's doing. He owned a couple gyms, and he was like a model and stuff like that. He's smart. I like him. But he showed me this kind of training after I did my last strongman, and I fell in love with it, man. I love it. One set to failure, and I'm destroyed.
Yeah.
And it's one workout a week. I'm like, I do feel that unless you're using machines as a beginner, which, I'm kind of reconciling this idea of using machines because I come from a functional training background, but that for a beginner, it's good. I think you still need to build a solid foundation based on volume.
Yeah.
But once you got a solid foundation and you can really create intensity in the tissue, HIT training, high intensity training, this Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates, Arthur Jones style, it's like a hack. It's the greatest bodybuilding hack I ever found. And so I love it. Yeah, that's what I'm into right now.
That's cool. That's awesome. And so best place for people to find you. Where are you most active now? YouTube, Instagram, everywhere?
Yeah, follow me on YouTube, Elliott Hulse, my Elliott Hulse channel. I post on my Strength Camp channel from time to time. Now that I have this new workout I'm going to promote, I'll be on there. Instagram, I mean, I don't even run my Instagram account. I'm there, once in a while, but it's just all reposted stuff from like, you got to make so much content these days, bro. It's annoying. I got to make reels. I got to make stories. I got to make TikToks. I got to make all this shit just to remain relevant. I like just making YouTube videos. So that's where you'll get me. Okay. But if you want my content, you
get it anywhere.
You go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, you go on Facebook, you go wherever people make content, because apparently that's where you got to be.
Yeah, I hear you. That's what I'm trying to. That's the thing. It's like, how do I get my shit everywhere and still have time to do real work?
Help. That's the only way.
Yeah,
you gotta hire help.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Absolutely loved our conversation. Everyone, please please subscribe. Go check out Elliott's stuff. Make sure you're following him if you're not already. And thank you, and I'll see you guys later.